Now that I have a better sense of how George Colazzo was murdered, I start to collect more documents like trial transcripts and court filings in the case against Richard Rosario. There are thousands of pages, and I need to have a good sense of them. So I've read through a lot of this paperwork, and here's what I know for sure. The case against Rosario was based solely on those two eyewitnesses. There was no forensic evidence, there was no physical evidence against him, and there was no murder weapon ever recovered. I also find out here that Rosario was telling me the truth about at least two things. He did turn himself in that night, and he did give a statement to police where he names 13 people who he said could confirm that he was in Florida, and he also gave them a copy of a bus ticket showing that he had taken a Greyhound bus from Florida. So I want to find these alibi witnesses and see what they remember. So in November 2014, I pack up my gear and head south. So here we are in Florida. We just got here. What we're doing here is we're on our own journey. Is he telling the truth? Was he really down here on June 19th, 1996 when this murder was happening in the Bronx? We're going to drive around Florida looking for alibi witnesses to see what they say.
1 mile, right exit at exit 87B.
Our GPS is taking us to John Torres' house. I'm in Jupiter, Florida, heading to the first two names on Rosario's list of alibi witnesses, John Torres and his wife Janine. I'd called earlier, so they're expecting me.
Hey, Dan. How you doing?
I wonder how they'll possibly remember a single day nearly 2 decades earlier. You don't like cameras. You don't want to be on camera.
No.
It took a little convincing to get Janine to go on camera. Why are you talking to us?
I know he was in my house, so I can't live with myself knowing if there's any way I can help him, at least to just tell the truth.
She says she'll never forget both Richard Rosario and the month of June 1996.
I was pregnant with my first son. We were living in a small apartment. Richard was down from New York, staying with us.
Janine tells me her husband John and Rosario were friends, and that she didn't like it. And you remember clearly him staying with you?
Yeah. Yes, trust me, I remember that.
Why do you say it that way?
Because I did not want him in my house. They were always out, hanging out, partying, and...
But even though she feels that way about Rosario, Janine says she knows he was in her living room on June 19th, 1996. And there's a specific reason why she remembers. She was just hours away from going into labor with her first child. You were home on the 19th?
Well, I went to my doctor's office, and when I came back home, it was like midday. He was on the sofa with my husband, and I was telling them that the doctor wants me to go to the hospital.
Midday. I get goosebumps when I hear that, because it was midday on June 19th that the crime happened in New York. And Janine says she's certain Richard Rosario was in her apartment in Florida, just as Rosario claimed in his statement to police.
I can tell you where my sofa was, where my TV was, where the bedrooms were. He was sitting on my sofa, and I remember telling Rich, you gotta go, my baby's coming.
I also speak with her husband John, who, like his wife, clearly remembers that day back in 1996. And there's something about John that's interesting, especially for an alibi witness. He's a Palm Beach County Sheriff's deputy.
My son was born on June 20th, 1996, and they're claiming that Richard killed someone on June 19th, 1996, which that's physically impossible because he was in my house when we were leaving for my wife to go to the hospital to be induced. I'm looking at him, talking to him, June 19th, June 20th. It is 1,000% impossible for Richard to have committed that crime. There's no way. He can't be in New York and Florida at the same time.
The night he turned himself in,
Right.
he gave a statement to the police and gave them alibi names and addresses and phone numbers, including yours. Did anybody ever call you?
Not a single phone call. Not a single phone call, not a letter.
At the time, John wasn't a cop yet. He was 21 and unemployed.
Nobody. No one from NYPD called me just to confirm if what he was saying was true.
After Rosario's arrest, when John didn't hear from the police, he says he called Rosario's attorney, but didn't hear back for more than a year. Then, sometime before the trial, Rosario's attorney called, asking John and his wife Janine to testify. And they did.
I testified at Richard's trial, but it just fell on deaf ears. They didn't believe anything that I said or that anyone was saying when they were telling them that he was in Florida.
At the end of our conversation, John does something that would stay with me. He asks his son to join us, the one who was born the day after the murder.
This is my oldest son. The scary part about it is this is how much time has gone by that Richard's been in jail, you know? From the time that he was born, this is how long it's been.
So now I'm trying to figure out what to make of all of this. John and Janine seem so credible to me, but 12 jurors didn't believe their testimony. And when he testified in his own defense, the jury didn't believe Rosario either. Prosecutors painted him as a liar, saying Rosario failed to disclose that a couple of months before the murder, he'd spent a few weeks in jail on a robbery charge. Obviously, there's more to this story, and it's important I keep an open mind.
These are the kind of things that, you know, when you're out on a story like this and you're following facts and you're on a journey to look for the truth, you constantly have to be talking to yourself not to be biased and not to let emotion take over and to stick with the facts.
And that's what I'm doing.
We're driving across the state of Florida,
working my way down the rest of Rosario's list of alibi witnesses, the ones who never testified at his trial.
It's ramped up a little bit, yeah, since yesterday's interviews.
It's time to find them and see what they say.
So no one's ever interviewed you like this?
No.
That's next
No.
on Conviction.